I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Sonoma City Council to order. And just a reminder to put your cell phones and watches on something other than ring while the meeting is in session. The City Council may discuss and or take action on any or all of the items listed on the agenda, irrespective of how the items are described. And no new items will begin after 9 p.m. unless a majority of the members present vote to allow the items to be heard. It's just kind of housekeeping. Okay, would you all please rise as you are able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of our country. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Farrar-Rivas.
Present.
Vice Mayor Gurney.
Here.
Councilmember Wellander.
Here.
Councilmember Dean.
Present.
Mayor Lowe.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have public participation using Zoom and in person as well. And there was a closed session, but there was no action taken. At this point, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Move to approve.
Second. Agenda has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the roll, please.
Councilmember Farrar-Rivas.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Gurney.
Yes.
Councilmember Wellander.
Yes.
Councilmember Dean.
Aye.
Mayor Lowe.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Are there any meeting dedications this evening?
Mayor,
Please.
yeah, I have the one.
Please.
I would like to dedicate our meeting tonight to our local resident, John McNeely. Yeah, he was the youth and a coach and a long time resident, and his funeral will be scheduled to this Sunday afternoon in the federal in the veteran building. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other dedications? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the council members' reports and comments. This is where
Sorry, Madam Lowe.
yes.
Did we skip the comments from the public?
we did.
Okay.
How did that happen?
No.
I'm so sorry.
These things happen.
At this point, we would like to entertain any comments from the public on anything that is not on the agenda tonight. And I see a familiar face. Mrs. Agramonte, nice to
Thank
see
you.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's
When-
right.
oh,
I'm hiding behind all the uniforms back there.
I see. Very
So, thank you so much, Mayor Lowe, and also City Council. I'm here on behalf this evening for Care Partners. Mayor Lowe, City Council, thank you for these few moments of your time to share information with you regarding Care Partners initiative. Each of you have a packet to enable you to learn more about the facts stated below. Fellow CPI directors one is joining me, Whitney Evan, who is our chair. Jim Keck could not make it, and Tom Deegan was unable to attend. Each one of you have received our letter to be placed on the dais regarding our efforts to bring attention to the fact that 29% of the city of Sonoma are 65 or older. California's master plan for aging details the needs of the 1 in 10 seniors with dementia. All need some level of care from family, neighbors, friends. Sadly, there is a stigma with this. We have two goals: to plant the seed for our funding request. The budget for recreation and community funding expiring 2023 is $192,000 plus lots of to be determined seniors at 29% of 192, so that's 56,000. Vintage House contract is for $40,000. Care Partners is requesting $16,000 for staff and startup expenses. The other, of course, is to create a dementia-friendly Sonoma to overcome the challenges faced by these families and how to rejoin our caring community. Dementia-Friendly America's Success is a successful national nonprofit. With support from the city, we can implement a dementia-friendly city. I refer you to the graphic on page 2 of the packet. And that has an outline, the graphic. And then page 3, which will tell you how to do the dementia-friendly city. With just a couple of moments, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope someday we'll be able to work together on this issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Agramonte. Nice to see you. Are there any other public comments? Any public comments from Zoom? No. Okay. Thank you. And now we will go to council members' reports and comments. My apologies, especially to Ms. Agramonte for doing this out of order. So council members are appointed to various boards and committees, and this is a time for us to give you an update on what we do in our free time and so forth. So we'll start with Mr. Wellander, if you have anything to report.
Well, thank you. I have not been avoiding these committees and commissions, but I only have one that I've attended. Excuse me, and it's it's an adjunct to the Pros Commission. It has to do with how do we create more trees in this community, and there is a lot of energy behind it. I have no specifics, but I am encouraged that hopefully we'll see some greening of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. June 8th, I attended the Tourism Improvement District meeting, and they are busy developing campaigns for the upcoming winter. It's kind of fun to say on the longest day of the year in the middle of summer. And anyway, they are planning quite a media campaign. They're looking to work with Healdsburg, the city of Healdsburg, and try to find some cooperative relationship with them around tourism. And the whole purpose of this organization is to really generate tourism and visitors to the valley during the off-season, and that's generally winter, the colder months. They also are supporting the Vintage Festival and the 4th of July fireworks, and they're in the process of developing their budget for the 22-23 fiscal year. And anyway, they are working very diligently, and they have a great desire to meet with the new city manager prior to the next meeting, which will be next month. I also attended the Library Advisory Board meeting, and that was very literary. The Bibliobus, which is a mobile library, is going to be visiting our fair valley, and they will actually be making stops at Firehouse Village, which is over on 2nd Street West. They too are working on their budget and developing that. One of the things that's relevant to us is the possible building leak, as the city owns that building, and so we're working with the city manager and trying to figure out whether there is even a leak and work through that. On June 17th, I had the pleasure of attending the 62nd annual Bear Flag celebration in our beautiful plaza, and it was actually very well attended by representatives of the Native Sons of the Golden West, and they came from all throughout California. It was interesting, and of course we went through a ceremony that included the history of the bear flag and the raising of it in the plaza, all the way through lowering the flag that was presently there and then raising a new one for the next year of this organization. organization, and I would encourage you to check that out if you get to hear about it in the future. And I think that concludes what I have been doing.
Very busy. Thank you so much. Ms. Farrar-Rivas.
Yes, so on, I have quite a bit here. I'll try to go very briefly through all of it. So on June 8th, I attended the Sonoma County Tourism Breakfast, and the main reason I went was because they were doing a report on the Q1 numbers in regards to TOT, so amount of people that were at hotels, and that's a good indication for many of the cities in regards to what kind of revenue you're going to be getting for your budget from that. And just as a reminder, we have our own tourism department, so we're not part of Sonoma County Tourism, but we work with them, and we are affected by what they do. One of the things is that they did say that the first quarter of 2023, the TO2 is anticipated to be pretty low because of the weather, because we're seen as, a sunny day place to come visit. And then the other thing is that they are really launching a Sonoma County being a sustainable county, so really attracting tourism to the county based on people that are interested in coming here because of our sustainability efforts. On June 7th, I attended the Adele Harrison graduation, which was wonderful, although I think someone should get them a new sound system, something that they could really use, because a young man did a wonderful speech in English and Spanish and nobody could hear it. So if anybody has any interest in, getting a sound system for them, we should think about that. And then on June 8th, I attended on behalf of the city of Sonoma, the Sonoma Valley High School graduation. And then on June 10th, I attended a fundraiser for Art Escape that was coordinated with Sonoma Bocce. And it was a lovely event, and they really wanted to make sure that I thanked Mayor Lowe for the help around that event in regards to permitting for that event and helping them. It was a great event. And then on June 16th, I attended a meeting of the Sonoma Mission Inn Union Committee, and that the Union Committee is seeking to unionize at Sonoma Mission Inn, and they're advocating for safe and healthy working conditions. And even though the Fairmont is not in the city of Sonoma, certainly all of the hotels that are in the Valley of Sonoma and how they are perceived and how their employees are treated and how services for customers, how well those services are delivered, is important to the whole valley. And unfortunately, currently, there is a labor dispute there, and the National Labor Relations found sufficient evidence to prosecute for 43 labor law violations. But it was a really amazing group of people to meet with. So I let them know that their efforts are recognized as being very positive for the whole community, even though they are not in city limits. And that was my couple of weeks.
Okay. Mr. Ding.
Thank you, Mayor Lowe. And I'm afraid I didn't attend any container meeting. Instead, yesterday, I went to our local farmer market to greeting our local residents and also celebrate and solstice today. And the people are expecting and the good thing, and overall they are very happy for our city councils and the staff, or no any complaints so far. Maybe the next time I will get complaint. Yeah. I appreciate it. I pretty much for sure on Tuesday farmers market is a really, really and valuable part of our Sonoma's life. Thank you.
Thank you for being there. Thank you. So I have to look at my phone because I can't even remember all the places I've been in the last 2 weeks. But so on Thursday, June 8th, there was a meeting of the mayors and council members and city managers in Sebastopol, and it was very well attended, and Sebastopol did a great job in showing us a new, exciting new workspace, art space that they have there, and we got to hear reports from all the different cities. And in fact, Sonoma will be hosting such a meeting in August. And so today I've been working on that. And ours is going to be so much better than Sebastopol's. That's what I have to guarantee you. And then we had several meetings with the city manager on Saturday, June 10th. I was able to be at the community center to dedicate their small libraries. They have 2 small libraries where you take a book and leave a book. One is more culinary and then one is general, but you know, I know there's a lot of libraries going around, and the vice mayor pointed out our wonderful library, but please check it out. And I have some books that I'm going to drop off there. So if you're interested, I'll be happy to share what I'm going to drop off. On Sunday, I actually went to Sonoma Raceway and saw the entire NASCAR race. By Tuesday, I could hear again, and so you'll be happy to note that. But there were a lot of people from Sonoma there. It was a very good place to talk to people and meet people. And although I've never really been a follower of NASCAR, it was pretty exciting. And I was able to bring a friend of mine there who was just thrilled because he'd never been able to do it, and he was so happy to be there. I was also at the Sonoma County Transportation Authority on the 12th, where we looked at some polling to see if we can go forward on a climate measure for the county, and also hired a consultant because the executive director will be leaving and she will be greatly, greatly missed. I would like to note that on Flag Day, which is the 14th of June, we do have new flags flying in the Sonoma Plaza. So I hope you'll all notice that, because the other ones it was about time to replace them. And I went to the Sister City celebration of our sister city in Kanyev. They're continuing to raise money, and it's just wonderful what they're doing for that poor war-torn country. On Thursday, I think Mr. Wellander was there as well. We were at Friedman Brothers to honor the employees of Friedman Brothers who saved a life by using their AED equipment, and it was just great to honor them and the fire department for all of the work that they do. And happy Father's Day to everyone. Happy Juneteenth. I know we're going to do something about that as well. And I'd also like to note that today is International Yoga Day. So, namaste. Okay. Been busy. So, now, city manager comments, please.
Great, thank you. And in honor of International Yoga Day, there was yoga on the plaza all day today. So if you experienced that, it was great to see out the window from the office. A couple of updates. There is a Caltrans public meeting tonight. Unfortunately, it's at the same time as this meeting, so you can decide which meeting you want to go to about the Verano Highway 12 intersection. It's from 6:30 to 8:30 tonight at El Verano School. They're getting input about that intersection. There's other ways to provide input on that intersection as well if you can't make it tonight. We can assist you with that if you want to reach out to us. I was notified officially late last week, or actually early this week, that we did receive a Measure O award from the county for $67,000 for 2 years for homeless programs. And I'll discuss that in a little bit more detail when we get to the budget and how that affects our current budget that you're seeing tonight. And a lot of events are happening in this plaza, as you're aware. We do have events happening on the weekends and use of the plaza, but also the amphitheater. And we do know it does need some work, and so we are working on cleaning that up, making sure that it's safe for people to use. And so you'll start to see improvements in the amphitheater over the next week or two as we move forward. So thank you to everybody that's provided input on that. And then finally, the Sonoma County Grand Jury released a report on Sunday. It was in the Press Democrat, and it's online as well. And one of the items that they identified was around our city-owned cemeteries. And so we will be reviewing that document both internally with our finance department and our legal team, and then we will be bringing back a recommendation and proposed actions to council as we identify steps to move forward. So I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that that's available. It's online. If you go to the Sonoma County Grand Jury website, if you want to find the document. And that's all I have today.
Thank you. Any city attorney comments?
I have no report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're moving on to presentations, which is the most wonderful part of our program. So I'd like to ask Amelia Moran Ceja to please come forward to the microphone, because she has received it's called the Maestro of Leadership Award, but she's a maestra, not a maestro. But I'd like, Amelia is the president and founder of Ceja Vineyards, and their tasting room is in Sonoma County. But I'd like you to just tell us a little bit about this award, and then we have a proclamation for you. If you could just tell us a little bit about it. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Mayor Lowe, for inviting me. I am thrilled to be here. And actually, my name is Amelia.
Amelia.
Yes.
Oh, perdón.
Oh, like Amelia Earhart. Yes. So tomorrow in San Francisco, I will be receiving the Maestro Award in the category of leadership, and by Latino Leaders Magazine, which actually started in Mexico in the 1990s, but then it was so successful there that it moved to the U.S. as well, and it's based in Texas. And these gatherings of influential Latinos happen in a few cities, including San Francisco, Dallas, New York, Miami, and Chicago. And it's to honor Latinos that have actually made an impact in different fields. In my case, in the wine industry. So, according to the editor, for my relentless pursuit of really changing and shaping the wine industry and making it so much more democratic and inclusive. And for my involvement within our communities as well, in both Sonoma and Napa. And I'm just very honored. I mean, some of the past awardees are, the CIO of Cisco, Tom Flores, who was the coach of the Raiders, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a fantastic group. And Laura Catena, the only other person from the wine world that has ever been honored since the Maestro Awards were founded in 2006 is Laura Catena, who is an Argentinian amazing winemaker and owner of her family's amazing winery. Plus, she's also part of a lot of trade associations. But so from Napa and Sonoma, it's me. So, and I'm just very thrilled. And it's going to get a lot of attention from the media, and it's going to be wonderful for the wine industry in wine country. So I'm very honored, and I am just so grateful to be invited to come and tell you about this amazing award. So thank you.
Thank you, and you've been an amazing role model for many young women like yourself who came here, big dreams, and everyone should dream big and succeed. So I'm going to come down and give you this award, and we'll take a picture and be on our way.
Great. Thank you so much.
Oh, just so I'm sorry.
That way we don't get the podium.
Yes.
And now I'd have a proclamation proclaiming June 12th, although we're a little late, but that's okay, as Women Veterans Day in the city of Sonoma. So I'd like the women veterans to come forward, and we have a proclamation that I will read to proclaim Women Veterans Day in the city of Sonoma. Do we have some women veterans to come forward to the microphone? And then perhaps you'll say something, but let me just give you a brief proclamation. June 12, 1948 marked the date that women were officially allowed to serve as regular and permanent members of the armed forces in the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and Air Force. And women have always played a unique role in the United States military history, overcoming obstacles to find ways to serve. And despite history's sparse documentation, women have always answered the call to protect and defend our freedoms from as far back as the Civil War. And whereas it took decades for the restrictions placed on their service capacity to change, women were able to participate in armed forces during peacetime. Whereas by 1970, women's role in the military expanded, finally allowing them to command roles in non-combat units. And it wasn't until 2013 that women achieved full status in the military when they were granted the right to serve in direct ground combat roles. Approximately 145,000 women in the state of California have served or are serving in the armed forces, and we owe an inexpressible debt to our current and past service women who have selflessly served so that we may live free. Their unquestioned loyalty and value will undoubtedly inspire future generations. And we have several proclamations. I think there's a few different groups, but if you'd like to just introduce yourself, I'll come down and deliver these proclamations.
Thank you, Mayor Lowe, City Council members, for acknowledging the 75th anniversary of women officially being official in the military. My name is Tricia Allman. I'm the president of Military Women Across the Nation. And I'd just like to follow up with what you shared. So historically, women have served with honor and valor in wars and conflicts throughout America's history, performing many jobs. They played vital roles in the Revolutionary War, serving as soldiers, raising morale, and spying on the enemy. More than 400 women fought in the Union and Confederate armies during the Civil War. During World War I, women served as nurses, bilingual telephone operators, stenographers, and clerks. During World War II, hundreds of thousands of women served the war effort at home and abroad, performing jobs in intelligence, supply, medicine, communication, and administration. Women also flew military planes as couriers, test pilots, transporters, and anti-aircraft artillery trainers. The contributions of these women convinced President Truman and congressional leaders to pass the June 12, 1948 Women's Armed Services Act, granting women's status in the U.S. military. Opportunities for women continued to increase during the Cold War era with the opening of the Reserve Officer Training Corps, Chaplain Corps, Civil Engineer Corps, and the service academies. By the 1990s, women commanded ships, directed bases, and flew jets for the U.S. military. In 1993, Congress repealed the Combat Exclusion Law. That same year, we had our first female Secretary of the Air Force and the first woman to lead a U.S. military branch of the Department of Defense. In 2008, we had our military's first female four-star general. In 2010, the Navy announced submarine positions were opening to women for the first time. In 2013, the last restriction on women's service ended with the lifting of the ban on women in direct ground combat roles. In 2014, we had the first woman to attain the rank of admiral in the Navy's 238-year history. In 2015, 2 women were the first females to earn the prestigious black and gold Ranger Tab of the U.S. Army. We all have a responsibility to provide service to our country regardless of race, color, creed, or gender. And we should all have the opportunity to wear the uniform and be a part of our nation's military. Women Veterans Day is a tribute to a groundbreaking day when women were acknowledged as essential to the war efforts and could serve in the regular armed forces. I served in the first Gulf War, electronics technician, U.S. Navy, and then the Coast Guard Reserve. You do it.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else like to come forward, at least to introduce themselves? I'll come down and bring your certificates.
My name is Moran Mooney, U.S. Navy veteran, 1981 to 2001. I was a hospital corpsman, and I retired as a chief.
Thank you.
Rose Nowak, United States Air Force, medic, served from 1959 to 62 during the Cold War, early Vietnam era. My day of separation was when the Cuban Missile Crisis ended.
Thank you.
I'm Leslie Fuller. I'm with AMVETS here in Sonoma, Hap Arnold Post 55, and I was United States Navy ground support equipment mechanic from 78 to 87.
Thank you.
I'm Willie Vaughn. I'm commander of American Legion here in Sonoma, first woman commander, and I served in the Navy 22 years and retired. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have these proclamations, and let's give them a round of applause for their service. One for each Petaluma group and the Sonoma group. Where did all they go? There you are. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. It's beginning to be a wonderful theme of these presentations that we are giving and honoring untraditional heroes in a way, and thanking them for their service. So the third one we have today is the proclamation for Juneteenth, the National Independence Day in the city of Sonoma. And Rebecca, I think you were going to come forward and speak to that. Did you want to talk about the presentation that happened or anything? I unfortunately wasn't unable to make it, but I know you were sold out too.
I am Rebecca Chikoris, and along with dozens and dozens of other people have worked to bring Sonoma Juneteenth holiday to the city of Sonoma, welcoming Sonoma into the community of cities throughout the Bay Area that have long-standing celebrations of Juneteenth. We did our second this year. And I just want to say that no one accomplishes anything significant by themselves. And so I'm here today to receive this proclamation on behalf of the many, many people within the city of Sonoma who work to make the Juneteenth holiday here a reality. And with the council's permission, rather than tediously read the names of everyone who has helped me, including one of our very first supporters, first candidate, then council member, now mayor, Sandra Lowe, who stepped forward almost immediately and lent the weight of her expertise and her prominence within the community to the effort. So I will, again, with the city's permission, I will submit a written list of those names to be entered into the record as you see appropriate.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to just read this one portion of the proclamation, because a lot of people are just learning about Juneteenth, quite honestly. And I think it's very important that we know what it stands for. It really has to do with the Emancipation Proclamation. This is the whereas. More than 2 years after Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, Union General Gordon Granger and his troops landed in Galveston, Texas on June 19, 1865, with news that the Civil War and slavery had ended. And June 19th was given the name Juneteenth, and it became a time of joyous celebration for African Americans. And yet, slavery did not end on that day for many people. Juneteenth celebrations are a time to recognize the ongoing fight for human rights and equality for Black Americans, and are commemorated through cookouts and faith services, many as the services and celebrations that were done at the community center. But since 2003, the state of California has honored Juneteenth, but we now have an actual federal holiday. And so thank you so much, Rebecca, for just taking the mantle and running with it and having 2 successful celebrations. We look forward to the next one and the next one. And thank you so much
It's
for
been
all
my
you're
pleasure.
doing.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Here's something for you.
I guess they want to get. I guess they might. You want to get. We're just gonna do next celebration. What a wonderful group of women we had to honor us tonight. I'm very proud of every single one of you. And at this point, yes, I heard clapping. That could be good. At this point, I tell people, if you want to stay and listen to the rest, we're going to talk about the budget. It's going to be thrilling. But if you have something better to do, we understand. So it's quite all right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on to the consent calendar. So all items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council or staff request specific items to be removed for separate action. And I'll entertain a motion, and then we'll see if there's any public comment. Is there a motion on the consent calendar?
I move to accept the consent calendar.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Mr. Wellander.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make a comment, not requiring any action from us up here, but I had the opportunity to review the expenditures, and one of the items that I picked up on is, let me rephrase that. I would like to strongly encourage all of us to shop local. I've seen a number of expenditures, albeit they're not big, but they're not from vendors that we do have such in town or up valley, and I think that we all talk the talk about shopping local. I want us as a city to be good role models. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Wellander, for that.
And we got a thank you from the,
Thank you.
all right. Did
I
you have
would
a
like,
comment?
I would like to ask some of the questions about 7.6 and regarding well number 1. And could you please explain a little bit? I know that is the oldest of freshwater well.
If you're going to want to discuss this, we should pull it.
No
But
discuss, just make
just
it
one
a
question.
I think it was just a
okay,
question.
just a question. Yeah, how often we make this kind of maintenance?
That's okay. Is that within the? Is that question okay, or do we need to pull it? He wants to know the frequency of the maintenance on the well.
I think that's fine. One
Okay.
question.
Thank you.
Yeah, and this is,
Mr. Berger.
thank you, Mayor Lowe, council members, good evening. This is more than maintenance. This is doing structural work and modifications to the well. We routinely do maintenance to the wells, monthly, yearly. Well number one's our best producer, and we are doing a project that's atypical for well maintenance. It's a retrofit. We're changing out the ways that you access the well. It's an old well, and we're making it safer for the employees and just safer for working near traffic in general.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any public comment regarding the consent calendar? Okay. All right. Seeing none, there's a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. Seeing no further discussion, we'll have the clerk call the roll, please.
Councilmember Farrar-Rivas,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Gurney,
Yes.
Councilmember Wellander,
Yes.
Councilmember Ding,
Aye.
Mayor Lowe.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. We don't have any public hearings tonight. We're moving on to the regular calendar. 9.1 is adoption of the fiscal year 2023-24 City of Sonoma operating and capital improvement budget, establishing a list of authorized positions, and allocating funds for homeless services. And our city manager and interim finance director will give us some information on this, and I understand there will be 3 separate motions that we will consider at the end of the presentations, all right? So, Mr. McBride.
4 separate motions.
Yes, that's what I said, 4 separate motions. Yes, I thought I said that, something like that. It was relatively close to that. Okay, yes.
Margin of error.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you, Mayor and Council. I'll
Yes.
start this off, and then I
Please.
will have our interim city CFO, Chuck McBride, carry on additional pieces of this presentation. First off, before we start, I do want to acknowledge staff and all the work that everyone's put into this. I know it's been a busy month pulling this information together and getting it to council and working through the study session and making some adjustments to bring back to you today. And thank you to the council for your support through this and questions you've asked along the way. I think this has made a better budget for us. As we go through this presentation, if you do see things or have questions or anything you want from us, please let us know, and we can always make adjustments through the adoption. So we will go ahead and get started. This is the adoption tonight. The goal is to have this adopted so we can have a budget moving into by the end of the month. So we'll move into next year. The schedule for today is to go over where we've been and how we got to today in terms of schedule, an overview of the budget. We're going to talk about the personnel, new funding requests, community programs, homeless funding, CIP, next steps, and then we'll go through the recommended actions. This will be a much abbreviated version of the presentation you saw at the study session. A lot of this is the same information, so we'll just highlight key elements to it, but happy to go into detail in any parts of this that you'd like to see. So in terms of the calendar, we did meet with the council in a public meeting to go over this as a study session, the budget where we were, some of the details, the rationale, the assumptions we're making in terms of revenue and projections, but also expenses moving forward. Tonight, we're here June 21st to do the adoption for the budget. And then in August, what we'll do is we'll take all this information and produce a budget book that everybody will have access to that have a lot of detail that goes along with it, the backup information and everything for the record. This is just a reminder that we do develop this budget with the council goals in mind, so that council goal setting process is critical every year, that council identifies what the priorities are. That does drive how we develop the budget, where we focus in terms of elements such as affordable housing, making sure that we have the right staffing in place to support that, working with general plan update, which the council acted on recently, and parks and other elements that are in the council goals. So it's important for us to keep tabs of that. Obviously, if it's not budgeted in this budget, it's less likely to get completed. So it's important that we identify that, identify how we're going to accomplish it if it's not in the budget. And if you have questions on that, please let me know as we move forward. Next slide. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Chuck McBride, again, our interim finance director, and I will come back in a little bit and we'll talk about specific programs.
Thank you, David. Honorable Mayor, members of the council. So these slides are materially the same as what you saw at the workshop on the 30th of May, so I'm not going to belabor these. First of all, we'll just hit citywide expenditures quickly. This is in attachment A to the supplemental report that you have within your folders there, and that's got a lot more detail. But this is just a top line look at this. General fund we will we'll talk about here in a moment individually. Capital projects are going to be covered by Mr. Berger here later in the presentation. Enterprise funds we have two. We have the water and the cemetery funds. So we talked a bit about those at the May 30th meeting. The water fund is about $6.6 million of that $7 million budget in enterprise funds. We do expect that the revenues will be sufficient to cover the expenses for that for the year. However, what we've not built into the budget are projections on what will be the impact of the rates that will come before council later in the summer and the fall. We also have the cemetery fund. So the cemetery fund makes up $316,000 of that $7 million and has it has revenues of $316,000 that are covering $509,000 in expenses. So those revenues include sales. They also include $50,000 that comes from the endowment fund for the cemetery. And then we have some money, that $42,000 that comes from a lease of the Mountain Cemetery water tank. Special revenue funds. Those will be discussed somewhat in the CIP. A lot of those are used for CIP projects, things like SB1 funds, gas taxes. These are accounted for separately because they have segregated uses. And then there were some questions on the internal service funds. So you can see the internal service funds individually in attachment A. However, there was a question in the May 30th meeting about what the fund balances were in those internal service funds. So we included those within the body of the supplemental report before you. And for management information systems, it has a fund balance of $194,000. The vehicle replacement fund has a fund balance of $787,000. And then long-term building maintenance is approaching $2.5 million in fund balance. And that's because there are a lot of relatively major maintenance projects that are expected to happen during the next year, such as HVAC replacement at the Haven, flooring and roofing at the Carnegie, and some asphalt projects at City Hall and at some other places in the city. And then finally, we have debt service funds. Really, the only thing in the debt service fund is the clean and renewable energy bonds that we entered into in 07-08, and that was for some solar projects we did in the city. So that's $41,000 or $42,000 in debt service that we pay annually on that. And then finally, you have the agency fund, and that's just the successor agency. That's the wrap-up agency of the former RDA. So this slide changed a little bit since we posted on Friday. We had grabbed a slide from the last slide deck, so this is updated a little bit. There was a $30,000 difference there. So the story here is that we obviously have expenditures of $25.4 million that are exceeding our revenues, and this is just in the general fund of $24.3 million. So this is leaving us with a $1.1 million deficit. Again, discussed at the workshop. We'll touch on the reserves here, but right now the plan is in the short term to use reserves to fill that deficit. And as David will talk about later, we'll be planning on working with the council, with staff, and trying to come up with ways that we can improve this picture in the long run. So revenues really haven't changed substantially from what you saw at May 30th. We'll just hit them real quickly. Transient occupancy taxes, we expect to go up by about 2.5%, and that's mostly based on increases in average daily rates. Property taxes are expected to go up by about 2%, and that's mostly just the Prop 13 maximum cap on those annual increases. Sales tax was looked at by HDL, who is our sales tax consultant. They expect us to go up by almost 3% in sales tax. Again, that's pretty good when you look at what they expect the state to do. They're supposed to do about 0.5% increase over the next year. So Sonoma is expected to outpace that. The Measure V local sales tax, that half-cent sales tax, is expected to go up by 4.5%. Ambulance billing revenues, we left level, status quo. I don't have any reason to think those will go either up or down. Fees and charges for services is one revenue source that came down marginally, came down by 3.4%. And again, that was just based on forecast development activity and revenues associated with that. And actually, that's kind of more of a return back to the baseline. Last year was actually probably a little bit higher than previous years. Franchise taxes are expected to go up by 8%. And again, the council had an item before them, I believe here recently, on one of the elements of that, which was Sonoma garbage, that had a substantial increase. So we see some increase in the franchise taxes. The big glaring gap in the revenue side of the budget here is the federal grants, the ARPA funds that we lost. So that's $1.3 million that was paid over 2 years, and that is now gone. And then other revenues of $1.5 million. So that's things like licenses and permits, fines and forfeitures, interest, cost allocation plan, things like that don't fit neatly into any of these other categories. So overall, we see revenues going down by about 5%. And here we just kind of give you an overview of how those taxes are allocated out. And kind of the big picture here that you can see is if you look at this pie chart from about 12 o'clock over to the 9 o'clock there, that's about 75% of your revenues, and 75% of your revenues come from those big revenue sources. So you're looking at TOT, property taxes, and sales tax. So, later when we start talking about possible solutions, especially when we're looking at the revenue side, those are the three places where you're really looking. And property tax really is not a place where you can have an effect. So you're really looking at TOT and your sales taxes. And next, we'll turn to expenditures. So this, I apologize, a little bit different in your packet. The numbers are the same. The headers up there was changed. So this is what we're comparing to when you see those percentages to the right. Is comparing that proposed budget to that middle column of the amended budget. So the amended budget's anything that was changed from the proposed budget of last year at mid-year. If you made adjustments, those are captured in here. So when we look at the changes, we're looking at the changes to amended budget. So personnel costs went up by 3%. Again, that's to amended, so that's a little bit artificial because you'll notice that the amended budget went up markedly from the proposed budget, and the reason is that captured the effects of those MOU changes. So the 3% that you see from the amended is really just capturing COLA increases and step increases that we see in the coming year. The PERS UAL stayed basically flat. That's just the liability that we have from prior changes in that CalPERS made. And then professional services actually came down a little bit. And again, we talked about this before. The reason for that is partially because we have some biannual expenses like elections that are not included in this budget year. So that comes down a little bit. There was also some one-time professional services such as a recruitment that we did. So that actually dropped down a little bit for the year. And then you have the police and the fire contracts, and those were based just on contractual increases. Police contract went up by 5%, and the fire contract went up by 6%. Remember, a portion of that is the three individuals that we pay for, the three additional individuals. And then operating costs went up by $380,000. I seem to have lost my slides here. Would you like me to just continue?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have hard copies, so we can continue on, and
Right.
we'll check on with IT.
They're also
on the
online.
website.
If people are following along, we're on see, what page would we say?
We're on page 9.
Page 9, thank you. Page 9
All right.
of the packet.
So the operating costs went up by $380,000, or 7%, and David will talk to some of those things later, but a big portion of that $308,000 was $260,000 in additions for homeless services, and then we had some things like increases in insurance and workers' comp. And then finally, we had transfers to CIP of $280,000, and again, that will be talked about when we cover the CIP portion. And you have general fund expenditures by type, and as you would imagine, with the city of Sonoma, about 48% of our costs, like most cities, goes to safety services, so that's police and fire, and a lot of those costs are actually in the contracts, with our next biggest expenses being those operating costs, and then the next biggest being personnel costs. And then we gave you a snapshot of the general fund expenditures by department. So I'm not going to belabor these because, again, they really haven't changed markedly. I wanted to call out a couple of things. We did have an increase in the public works budget, and you can see that in the public works admin line. And that was due to the temporary trailer that we put in there for $50,000 and the on-call engineer that we put in there for $50,000. We also had, you see, an increase in the building budget. That was due to the OpenGov consulting, a part-time contract building inspector, the solar app, and then plan printing that we talked about at the May 30th meeting.
Excuse me, since
Yes, ma'am.
folks in the audience don't have this, can you just talk a little slower for them? I know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and honestly, if there's anyone here who would like to look at my copy, they're welcome to, because I'm looking at it online on the screen. They're welcome to take a copy of it.
We did put a few copies out in the front of the
Good,
presentation
perfect.
as well.
Okay, we're good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, please continue.
If you look at the community activities line item also, and you just see a top line number there, but there was a question about where we had provided funding for the Chamber of Commerce and for the Visitors Bureau. So that number includes $125,000 for the Chamber of Commerce and $100,000 for the Visitors Bureau. And then finally, I'm going to skip to the general fund reserve slide and talk about that a little bit. So we did estimate a balance of $11.7 million in the general fund reserve at year's end. So we talk about this a little bit within the body of the staff report and the supplemental report. But just remember that we have a baseline reserve policy of $1.5 million, and then we add to that 2 months or 17% of operating reserve of the operating budget. So I think in the body of that comes out to $4.3 million if memory serves. So you're well in excess of that at $11.7 million. So you see that with our revenues and expenditures, we have that deficit of $1.1 million. And when we take that out of the general fund reserves, that will leave us with $10.6 million. So again, good news there that that money is time, and that gives us some time to take a look at this issue and see how we sort this out in the long term. And at that point, I'll take questions, or I can hand it back to David to continue.
Okay, because we're going to take these separately. Is that correct? You want motions after each section, or do you want them after the whole thing?
I would recommend we do that after the whole thing. We only
Okay.
have a few slides. I'm going to go
Sure.
through the positions and a couple other things, and I think that way we can have a conversation in context of all the pieces at one time.
Sounds good. So at this point, we'll take questions from the council. Any questions regarding the general fund presentation? Yes, Mr. Wellander.
2 questions. The first one goes back to your general fund revenues by type. And you went through, and the net sum is a change of a negative almost 5%. Would it be fair to say that the projections that you have posted here are realistic, conservative, should not experience surprises in the next fiscal year?
Yes, council member, they're always going to be conservative. So when we do the budget, if there are unknowns, On the revenue side, we're going to project low, and on the expenditure side, we're going to project high. So yeah, these are very conservative. I kind of went back and looked at our history, how we do on projections. It's not great, especially over the last 2 years. It's been, a forecaster's worst scenario because, we went into COVID making assumptions that certain things like sales taxes and TOTs would go down. That wasn't always what the experience was. We actually saw a pretty marked increase in sales tax. And then the next year, as we exited, we saw a market increase in TOT. So it was obviously wasn't anticipated, I don't think, that we were going to get that ARPA money. So our track record is not fantastic, but if we miss, we're always going to miss to the low side. So I guess I'm in a very long-winded way telling you that these are very conservative, and that if we get surprised, we're going to get surprised with higher revenues than we're projected here.
Great. And my second question, and I know that it'll be a topic that we'll be discussing down the road, but I'm very pleased about seeing that there was savings for future, such as our reserves, and that we're able to deal with our deficit quite quickly. A comment was shared with me that the cemetery fund has been running negative, and it might have been suggested, I didn't totally comprehend it, so hence I'm asking for clarity. Does that deficit have any impact on the realistic net of our reserves?
Well, I can tell you this, you are running negative, so the numbers that I looked at for the cemetery is your endowment fund has about $800,000, and I'm talking very round numbers here. You have about $800,000 left in your endowment fund. The cemetery operating fund is in a deficit of $1.8 million. So if you net those funds out, you're in a deficit of about $1 million. Yeah, $1 million. We're going to have to sort out how that deficit is addressed. I don't think we would recommend, bringing that fund balance to zero by dipping into the general fund reserve at this time. I think there's a few things that we need to look at before. I mean, you've seen the grand jury report. There's some recommendations. So those are things that we're going to have to look at over the next, 6 months, year, to see how we address that cemetery fund. But this is not a new, obviously the cemetery deficit's not something that happened in the last year or two. It's been running a deficit for a number of years. So it's run up that deficit balance quite a bit.
Thank you for that explanation. That's it.
Thank you. Any other questions on the general fund before we move on to the next section? Okay, seeing none, please proceed.
Okay, I'll take over for a little
Great.
bit here.
Oh,
We're going to
wonderful.
talk about positions. There's one slight adjustment here on this slide that I want to highlight. When we went back through the contracts for our part-time employees, we made sure to adjust this to account for the high end of those contracts allowable hours. So this did change by 0.25 FTE in the non-departmental community activities. That went from a 1.75 to a 2, which changed the overall FTE for 2023 and 24 to 44.5. So that will be, that's the reflection. I am going to make that adjustment and make that correction when we do that resolution. I'm going to make that statement. So if council passes that resolution, I would request that you pass it as amended when we get to that point. I also want to note that doesn't have any impact to the budget that you're adopting in terms of the general fund budget. This next slide is a summary of those changes. This has not changed. The changes that I just mentioned is at the bottom right-hand corner in the city manager's office. That's changing from a 0.5 to full-time. It previously said 0.75, which was incorrect for the contract language. So that was been updated. All the rest of this has stayed the same and is reflected in the budget as we move forward. One key item on here is the addition of a building official. That is a separate item later tonight. If the council supports this budget as it is with the building official budgeted, there's an item to establish that position in the position control so that then we can then hire. So the position control that you're going to approve tonight does not include it. So when you look through that list of positions, you won't see the building official, and that's because you haven't voted on that yet, and that's secondary. The next slide will be the org chart, which the only changes here, this request during the workshop was to highlight contract employees and part-time employees. So this chart has been modified to reflect that. those services on the right-hand side, the top right-hand side, police, fire, code enforcement are all contracts. And then we do have one part-time after these changes in the budget for the sustainability coordinator, and that's highlighted in this org chart. The next slide identifies the new funding requests, and so I wanted, Chuck talked a little bit about this as he went through his presentation, but I want to call these out specifically just so that council and the public are aware of them. There are ongoing expenses that are being added, and there's one-time expenses that are being added. All these are currently reflected in this budget as we move forward, and we did talk about these when we went through the study session, but I wanted to have them here as well in case there's additional questions. The Recreation and Community Fund program, Chuck discussed this a little bit in terms of where this is in the general fund and what else is funded by this in terms of the chamber and the Visitors Bureau. In addition to that, we have contracts for specific funding amounts that are listed here. Since the last time we met, we calculated the policy unallocated amount and the policy-driven council discretionary funding, and those amounts are listed here. And essentially is the first bold number at the bottom of this list, the $53,000, is the remainder of the 90% that hasn't been spent in the contracts above. That's what's left for discretion of the council over the year. And then there's an additional 10% that per the policy has called out that the council has access to utilize, and there's a process for that throughout the year in terms of how we fund programs. One of the big, another change in addition to this budget presentation is the homeless funding allocation. In this budget, and what we discussed at our workshop was that we were going to allocate $260,000 to homeless services. What I've done since that time is worked with the county, looked at our strategic plan, worked with our service providers to identify the needs, and came up with a recommendation on how to distribute the $260,000 to align with our strategic plan, to align with other funding sources that are out there, and to try to address the current needs that we have in our community. The recommendation that I'm putting forward tonight is that we allocate $50,000 to SOS to address food distribution. Currently, SOS receives $30,000 from the city. I'm recommending that gets moved to $50,000. $50,000 to HAS, which to support the non-congregate shelter operations and day services. So focusing, consolidating day services where individuals will be staying in terms of the new village site. And then funding for a case manager of $100,000, and that would support all the individuals that are being served in our area to help connect to services. There's a lot of synergies that are currently happening, both with the county bringing in their service hub, which will be very close to this location as well, but also SOS acquiring a facility over by this location to focus on food distribution, which is a great site. So we want to support all these different efforts to align them and support how they move forward. There is, the last item is a $60,000 line item out of the general fund for funding for by names list project management services. This is one where I mentioned earlier in my city manager comments that we received the Measure O grant award of $67,000 for this purpose. So currently my recommendation is that we don't fund this with general fund. We utilize the grant. It's going to take a while for the county's grant process to come to fruition, but I'm working through that right now with the county. Apply that to this by names management services, which would free up $60,000 that we can evaluate for additional homeless services as we go through this process. So currently, what the resolution that you have tonight would allow me to start working on entering into contracts and working with our service providers to do these first three items, which is the food distribution, day services, and case manager. And if we do, once I get the grant finalized, I can come back to the city council and award that to address that by names list management services. We have one more slide and then what kind of a wrap up. So what I would recommend is if Mike just give a quick high view of the CIP just to let you know where we are. I'll close out and then we can answer questions on the entire presentation before we move into the resolutions, if that's okay with council. Okay.
Thank you. The graph in front of you is our 5-year projected goals for CIP. Fiscal year 23-24, the second column is the one that we're focused on tonight, and that is after the carryover column. That represents the funds carried over from previous years. One thing to note on this table is that of the $5.392 million that's proposed to be spent in fiscal year 23-24, the only general fund asks are relative to projects B2 for $50,000, P8 and P12 for $15,000 and $20,000 respectively, T4 $125,000, T7 $20,000, and T10 $50,000 for a total of $280,000. Those are the general fund asks that we could bring your attention to on this chart. All the other dollars that are on there are other funding other than general fund. And we're available to answer any questions regarding totals, single project values, and or any questions on individual projects.
Okay, thank you. So we'll wrap up here, and then we can have questions. So the next slide would be next steps. We will be working on creating the budget book, is our next priority to get that done. The next few months, we will be looking at revenue options in terms of what's possible. And you heard Chuck earlier talk about where we might be focusing our attention. Conversations have already started with the Chamber and others to look at what's possible. We need to move on that to determine what type of revenue options we want to look at. If we need to do polling, we need to do that probably in the fall. So this budget does include the funding and sufficient amount of funding to do the polling required for any initiatives that we want to put on the ballot. That has been verified with those that do polling. We also are looking to work on, obviously, developing a plan to address this deficit by the next year. There is a established finance committee that the city does have, and so as we develop our budget calendar for the year, which was a request from the study session, we will detail out what we want to get accomplished in terms of getting caught up on audits and everything else that we've talked about, including preparing for the next budget, revenue measures, any structural changes, and we will utilize that finance committee to help facilitate that process on the way through before it comes to council. And so I just want to let council know that does exist. I plan to activate that committee and put them to work as we go through this process. So I'll keep you apprised of that timeline. And the final slide just lists out the recommended action. There are 4 resolutions. They all do 4 different things. We have to take them in this order. But before we go to this, I want to entertain questions, get any feedback you have, and then we can go through the resolutions.
Okay, so we'll do it like this. We'll see if there are questions on any of the things that have been presented from the council. We'll open it up to the public, and we'll bring it back to the council for consideration of motions. All right, so questions first. I see Ms. Farrar-Rivas ready to push a button, so please go.
Yeah, so I have 2 questions. So on separate issues. So on page 18, so for the community fund program, was there any consideration? I see that we have this $28,000 discretionary funding, and I realize we may want to hold that for something else going forward. Yeah, I thought we had other discretionary funding too, but this is the only discretionary funding. Is there another?
The line right above it is discretionary as well.
Oh, okay, so it's about 80.
The combined
Yeah.
value is 80.
Okay. And so I know we want to hold off on that, but I wondered if there was any consideration regarding the services that we are funding. You know, when you look at Boys and Girls Club, Vintage House, the Ecology Center, Sonoma County Transit, services that really provide significant services to people in the community that are needed, and understanding that nonprofits, as well as everybody else right now, are suffering from issues around inflation in their budgets. Was there any consideration of looking, and maybe this is something we look at later on? I know that these numbers are related to a percentage of our overall revenue, or are they set?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The first 4 items on this list have contracts that are with the city. So as we move forward, looks like all these are due this coming year.
right.
And so what we can do is during that conversation with those is build, if we want to build in an inflationary element to those contracts, we can have it at that time. That way it's built in and we can plan for that. So that's an option we can.
Okay.
And I would just say the other items, Sonoma County Transit, that one, those are typically based on the need for that year, and those requests come in. So inflation probably wouldn't be the appropriate mechanism for some of these other items.
Right, that's what I was thinking with those two. But good, thank you very much. And then on the slide that I had spent much time looking at and trying to figure out is the on page 20 on that carryover funding. Because when you look at the totals, it's not included in the total for the 5-year total. What happens with that funding? So if I go look at the building facilities, that 645, that is the total of 23, 24, 24, 25, 25, 26, 26, 27, 27, 28. I can talk as fast as Chuck can when I want to. So, but the carryover funding's not included in that. What happens to that $217,000?
The 217,000 is carryover from the previous year that hasn't been spent yet, and it will be spent. So the 217 specifically is for the Depot Park Museum HVAC project.
Okay.
Yeah, and
All right.
that will be spent. And the totals can be a little bit ambiguous because we have more than just the projects that are listed reflected in some of the totals.
Got it.
Yeah, like the first one, which is the carryover funding for the only project listed is Project BF2 in the first column in the first cell for a subtotal of $217,000. That $217,000 is Project BF8, which is not shown because there is no request for fiscal year 23-24. 100% of the funds are carried over.
Okay. You want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I'm not
The
sure.
vice mayor has to follow up.
I'm not sure I'm quite clear on that, but if you're carrying the funds over, does that suggest that the project has not started, or that it's partially completed, or could it be a combination of both?
Combination of both.
Okay.
It's in process and to be started. Yeah.
I'll just add to that. I think what this graphic shows, and to keep it focused on this current year that you're reviewing, it's been all the projects that are not having additional money added in this current year have been filtered out. But the dollar amounts still carry forward to show that how much is in the account. So I think what we need to do is, I think we can always show that entire list. It's very long, but I think that's something that we need to do as we move forward in future budgets to make sure you have all those spreadsheets.
Yeah, because as a numbers person, when I see a number,
Right.
I'm looking for what it's attached to. So I'm it's going through everything, going, how? What is that?
Understand.
But yeah, but thank you. I understand it now.
Okay, more questions. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Ding.
I have a question regarding cemetery account, which is an enterprise account. And right now it is showing $1.8 million. And the loss, just like you just mentioned, that is not in the last year's. And accumulated for many, many years, even the decades. So now I'm wondering, and this kind of money dollar already observed and by whatever from the other enterprise account or from the general fund, it's possible we can fix it because either the write-off, I don't know, yeah, using your technical, tools, because it really bother the people when they look at the cemetery account, $1.2 million, the loss, how we can carry the over forward. And also in the last year, I was in the city council and consult with a professional company and give us a great idea and a plan how to develop our local cemetery. But if we have the $1.2 million lost of the money, it's really the bother. I want to you give us a little bit advice or any ideas. Thank you.
Okay. I take it that will be to future time? Because I don't have any fixes for you on the cemetery right now. There were a number of recommendations made, but we have to vet out how valid those were. I mean, one of the recommendations I saw was to add staffing and add software. That will obviously increase costs. That will obviously increase the annual deficit. So I think we really have to take a look at what the recommendations are and how realistic they are and what is the size of those impacts. I don't know, when you're looking at a revenue source of about $315,000, I don't know how much room you have to expand that. And, that's going to depend a lot on the particulars of the cemetery, how much room that you have to increase, the fees that you charge for things like liners or, vases and that I don't know how much room is in there, and I haven't looked at any of those consultant reports. I know there was 2 main reports that were done, the last one in 22, and I have not looked at those, so I really can't give you an intelligent answer as to how you would stem that deficit bleeding.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it sounds like we're going to have to come back to that anyway because of the grand jury report. So there'll be other reasons to have this conversation as we go forward. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Wellander.
2 questions. On page 17, I know it was mentioned, the justification. I'm getting rather forgetful. Refresh my memory as far as the use of the temporary office trailer.
You want to take that one, Mike?
There's a plan to consolidate and make more room in Carnegie for finance. And part of that plan is to move, there's 2 public works employees currently in the lower floor at Carnegie, and to make those 2 office spaces below extra space for more people in finance. And it's a big picture thing. It's been put in the budget as just in case, if we want to make a move those employees out of Carnegie, out to 8th Street, and put them in a temporary trailer.
Thank you. And I do have a second one for you, Mike. And that goes back to the capital expenditures or let me get to the sheet so I can speak a little bit more intelligently. Given the surprise of being in a deficit and not feeling very comfortable with that, is there any value in looking at some of the CIPs and asking the question whether or not any of those projects can be deferred? And when I say deferred, not forgotten, but deferred without possibly what I would call a significant negative impact.
We've already looked into trimming, and I've had conversations with our city manager about that. We've already looked into trimming. Yeah, and deferring isn't the only option. For instance, we have a $125,000 on-call concrete contract. In the past, we have spent $60,000 on those operations, and this year I had high aspirations, and we added another $50,000-$60,000 in there for this year's budget. That could be one of the things that we could fairly easily trim.
Well, and again, maybe it's just semantics. I'm not looking for trimming, I'm looking for deferring. And the reason I say that is that as we get further into the fiscal year, we'll have a more accurate forecast as far as how our streams of revenue are coming forth. I just think that is from a public perception standpoint, to me, it's even though we do have revenues, general reserves, I'm sorry, that it just seems like it would be good for us to slow things down if we can without having a negative impact. So again, it's not trimming, it's deferring.
Yeah, and the reason I say trimming is because a couple of these are set up that they can be half. Whereas a CAP project that goes out to bid, you can't do that, and that could be deferred, you're right.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions before we open this up to the public? Yes, Ms. Farrar-Rivas, please.
So one of the things I want to continue as we're looking, because I think that this could both be a revenue generating as well as looking at funding, is looking at traffic concerns and looking at how we're lowering vehicle miles traveled. And I see some, this being in our one-year council goals, I see some of the budget going towards some traffic calming measures, pedestrian safety. I didn't see anything around parking improvements, shuttles for the hotels, which is also probably coming out of the Climate Action Committee too. It's like that there's not anything budgeted in there yet. And then also along that same line, I know I have my climate hat on now, you may notice, is that this new vehicle, rental of the police vehicle, because I know one of the things we're really looking at is the potential of the city, looking at all new vehicles being electric vehicles, if that's a possibility with that. You know, as long as we're moving that direction, is that something that can start happening now?
Yeah, I think to answer the first part of your question, in terms of vehicle miles traveled, there's a number of initiatives currently underway that will bleed into this current year. So bike parking, which is currently under review and a plan coming forward. The parking study is currently actively moving forward. Obviously, the general plan will be a big discussion about that and how we wrap that into our overall network in terms of connectivity. So there's a number of efforts that are built in currently that are ongoing that will continue on into fiscal year 23-24 to address those items. The other, in terms of the vehicle, I did talk to the chief and Public Works. Part of what we're doing is moving this car and the use of this car into the Sonoma County Fleet Management Program. So we will be leasing this vehicle from Sonoma County Fleet, which the rest of their vehicles are. Currently, the Sonoma County Fleet is looking at electric vehicles and how to move their public safety into electric vehicles. But they're going through testing processes. How do you outfit the vehicles? So they're going to go through all that. So we'll be able to leverage their effort and their work. So once they've identified how to do that, that will be an option for us since we're contracting with them as we move forward. So we're keeping an eye on that. I did talk to the chief. He's aware of it, and he'll keep an eye on it as well. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So I have a question. This is, I think, for Mr. Berger. And of course, you know what my pet project is on page 20. Which
We're
is the
now in
park
the pet project section of the agenda.
Well, and it's, you know, it's the Fifth Street West Park. And it's the project for the people who live on the west side, I should say, and I am one of those people. So I'm just looking at how this flows, and so in 23-24, tell me what this 25,000, what does that, is that planning? I mean, when do I get to put a shovel in the ground at the corner of MacArthur and Fifth Street West?
I'm going to say that represents planning and design, possibly design phase. You can come on up, yeah. It's Oriana's pet project.
Oh,
it's not just your pet
it's,
project.
you know, and I, it's all of us on the west side. We're all eagerly waiting for this project.
Yeah,
Yes.
the 25,000 represents design, and that's the ask out of the general fund. So we have
Okay.
more money in Quimby in park and lieu fees that we could use to further that. We have 3 big park projects that we're hoping to do this year: the Olson improvement, the one at Sonoma Oaks, and then Fifth Street West and MacArthur. And the landscape architect that we got on board is running through the same process with all of them. So there'll be a public outreach campaign in the fall. So you can come dig a shovel then and
Okay.
come to this community survey. And then we should have
Yeah.
designs that we bring to our pros committee mid-year, but
Great.
so probably actually
Yeah.
launching will be next year or late spring, but we do have kind
Sounds
of
great.
a project budgeted. We don't have our hands wrapped around what the project's going to look like just yet.
That's great, and thank you for all the work on the Olson project too. I was out there and looked at it, and it's really needs, you know, a lot of love and care over there, and I'm looking forward to what happens in that area. So those were my questions. Yes, Mr. Gurney.
Regarding the Fifth Street Park, I'd like to have more information about how this project even came to fruition. During the campaign, I walked the neighborhoods over there, and nobody ever said anything about a need for a park. And I know it's plain dirt, and it lends itself to having a park, probably. But I would like to just understand more about how this happened, because there are a lot of other things, affordable housing that we talk about, and the lack of space. So perhaps before we start digging in the ground, that we could get some more information.
The main reason is there's funding for the developments that happened right there. So Mockingbird and the upcoming development Hummingbird, they pay park and lieu fees because they don't have a park in their development. So that money has to be used for a park in that neighborhood. So we can't use it for affordable housing or anything else. It could only be used for a park. And so that's an obvious spot because it's right there, and that's why it's been on our radar since Mockingbird, and because the mayor has interest in it. And we also did a park assessment last year, which was in its final phase, but in that we kind of identified that area as being one of the only areas in the city that's lacking a park. There's not a park within a quarter mile of there. So as part of our process, we will be doing community outreach, and if Mayor Lowe's the only person who wants a park there, then we'll find that out, and you can fight with the community, but we think
I
there's
mean, believe me, if I mentioned it, it's not because I'm the only one.
No, and
I
just
guarantee.
to add to that and to emphasize, Public Works did put a graphic together that showed the parks in town and the radius that was generated for this graphic that the affected people by parks in town. And there is a gap there in that specific region. And between that and, as Ms. Hart referenced, the Quimby funds that can only be spent in the specific area, then 1 and 1 made 2, and we are starting initial phases of looking into placement of a park.
I have a question. I'm sorry, new council people, but these funds that you're
That's
referring
okay,
to,
yeah.
can you use them for ongoing maintenance? Or does that become our burden?
No.
No, yes, no, yeah.
The park and lieu fees are only for development, so there would be maintenance funds. We do have other revenue streams like Measure M that we can use for maintenance, and we can develop parks that are as low maintenance as possible. So we're looking at all of that in the development.
Okay, thank you.
As a follow-up to that, what is the radius distance? I'm very familiar with Mockingbird and the other projects, and I know that we have the Quimby fees, but what is the physical distance from those two projects that we need to be spending these Quimby fees on? Because I can't believe that it happens to be across the street, which is very convenient, but what is that? Because I'd like to just get a better perspective.
I'm not sure what the actual legal radius in the Quimby law is.
And correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I've dreamt it. There is a park off of 5th Street West as you head where that convalescent hospital, or not convalescent, but the assisted living facility is. There's a cross street that flows off of West MacArthur that goes south. You go down that residential district that was probably built in the 60s, maybe 70s. There is a green space there.
You mean Herrnstein?
I don't know what the name of it is. I'm just saying it's a green space.
There is a park there, yes.
Okay, that's it.
So I'd like, since we're talking about the park, I'm sorry, but I got to talk about this a little bit. So when I was campaigning, like you, Mr. Gurney, I also talked to people. And of course, I live in that neighborhood. Across the street from this area, before Mockingbird and all the other birds went in there with their lovely market rate houses, there across the street is the mobile home communities, large mobile home communities of people who primarily are seniors and who do not, many of them do not drive and do not have access to parks. It was from them and organizing and talking to me that this whole thing came up. They mentioned the property and they said it was zoned for a park. It's not like we're creating a park. This thing has been zoned for a park for a very long time. The city has been using that property to use it for heavy equipment on projects throughout the city, whether it's drainage projects or cable projects, you'll see heavy equipment parked on that corner. The gentleman that lives next to that project, who is on one of our committees and commissions, when he heard that we were actually going to now do the park, he asked to meet with me, and I met with him, and I thought, oh my God, he's going to be mad there's a park there. He told me that he's so glad that there's going to be a park there because he has endured all of this heavy equipment in and out, the amount of dust, the amount of noise, how he's had to call all the various utilities in the city to please, water it down afterwards because it causes a lot of dust. So and I can go on about this. So when I say it's my pet project, it's not just because I think it's cute and, wouldn't it be nice to have a park on the west side? It's because the residents in the area are crying for it. And because of the study that was done, it is considered a park desert. So I'm glad in a way that the market rate houses have spurred this into fruition, but it actually has been talked about in my neighborhood and especially in the mobile home park community for a very, very long time. And there's a lot of people that live over there. So if you had to do it by population, not just by distance, you'd see that it's quite a lot of people that live there. So anyway, I wasn't going to go on about it, but since it was brought up, I thought I would.
And so I'm going to do a quick comment and marry my climate hat with the park. And also I think the tree project too. It's like one of the things that's going to be, as we know, temperatures are rising. I mean, we may go through El Nino and see more rain, but we're still having temperatures rising. And the people that are in the mobile home park are primarily low-income individuals. And even though they may have, air conditioning, that's very expensive in the summertime for them to be running air conditioning. And having a park that has trees makes a significant difference for people in low-income communities in times when the heat is very high. So I actually see it, and they're not going to travel far. I mean, that's one of the good things. It's like just across the street of where they are. And so I think, it's also, to me, a health concern. There's a health risk that we're looking at there. It's partially helping to alleviate that. So just marrying the two, being, what do you call it, intersectionality here,
Okay.
introducing that.
All right. Any more questions?
Non-park comment, but it was something that I won't say it's an epiphany, but I'm fully supportive of our public art desire, and I think it's great, and I think that I'd love to see us go forward further with it. But I think we may be missing out on a revenue stream that it seems in previous settings, and I specifically can speak of my experience in San Francisco, there's a fee that's associated with development for public art. And I think that there's enough interest in this community and could value that I would love to have a conversation sometime down the road about, is this something that we could, not in a usurious way in terms of all the developers, but be able to generate some additional funds that would allow us to have a really a positive art contribution.
I think you're right, and some of these things are people like to give money for art because they can see it, they like art, and people who want to enjoy it sometimes have more disposable income than other people. But we have a hard time raising money for some of the other things that we need because, no one wants to fund the new sewer well or whatever. I mean, it's just not that exciting. So so anything that we can turn into, and we can monetize. I mean, we should, as we go forward, that's something that perhaps as part of the calendar and the committees that the city manager is going to implement, that we can start looking at some of those things. Because I think there's a lot of things that we could monetize for the city of Sonoma that we're not doing right now. And I think that will help our revenue. So good suggestions.
I lied, I have one more question.
I knew it.
This goes to the distribution of the monies associated with homelessness. I believe I was told by a good resource that part of what's going to go with this distribution is a clear understanding and agreement as to how the monies will be spent and what the expectations are. Is that correct?
That's correct. If approved tonight, I will work with the service providers and develop a contract that outlines how it's spent, the expectations, and any sort of reporting that needs to happen.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, let's see if there's any comments from the public on this, and then we'll bring it back to the council for suggested actions. Any comments from the public, please?
Hello, my name is Elena Alioto. I live at 1130 Solano Avenue in Sonoma. I'm president of SOS Board of Directors. On behalf of the entire SOS Board, I would like to extend our thanks for the allocation of $50,000 to our food distribution program. As the need continues to grow, we feel grateful to the City of Sonoma for these funds and thus for partnering with us in serving healthy meals to our homeless community as well as those who are precariously housed. We continue to serve 2 hot meals, breakfast and lunch, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. Our food services play a vital part in preventing homelessness, as it affords those who are precariously housed to be able to spend their limited resources on rent, utilities, and other necessities. This is increasingly important now that state and federal COVID subsidies have ended, for as we all know, the cost of food and everything else continues to rise exponentially. SOS is not exempt from the effects of these rising costs. However, we are determined to meet the challenge of feeding the many people who are in need in our beautiful valley. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much.
My name is Judith Walsh. I live at 18953 Viewcrest Drive in Sonoma, and I'm the secretary of the board of SOS. And I want to add to what Elena was saying with some data points. So I'm going to read this because I can't memorize it. So I want to give you some data to show why the city funds will be so helpful. SOS served over 60,000 meals in 2002. And then in May 23 alone, last month, SOS served over 6,000 meals. This was nearly a 25% increase over the number of meals we served in May 2022, and a more than 45% increase over the number of meals we served in 2021. We've gone from serving about 250 meals a day to an average of 308 meals a day, and we served 380 meals on our highest day. And on May 30, for the first time, so many people came that SOS ran out of food and wasn't able to feed everyone who needed it. As you can imagine, this was very distressing. We also help homeless people by providing showers, laundry, and navigation services. And in 2022, SOS annual fund services cost was about $751,000. This was about 65% of SOS total budget, and it is currently funded entirely by private donors and foundations. And as Elena mentioned, as inflation keeps going up, our costs do too. So we thank you very much for helping us in our mission.
Thank you. Any more comments? Mr. Alabak, nice to see you in person tonight.
Thank you. Ron told me I had to come.
Thank you, Ron.
I see the clock is ticking. I want to thank Chuck for saying where the line for the Chamber and the Sonoma Valley Visitors Bureau is. I think it's okay to use reserves to cover the budget. I looked in, and my research showed that the city, even after they use the millions, still has more than twice the average amount of reserves that cities have. So I think that it would be all right to hold your fire until next year. I'd say something now that's maybe not that popular, but I think that police and fire are costing a lot in aggregate, and the city needs more spending on social safety as well. So I would suggest that some way is found to not allow the police and fire budget to grow to the point where it's squeezing the needs for other things, legitimate needs that the city has. Social safety, in particular, of funding affordable housing. These are serious needs, so I would just like to see some consideration given to that so that the budget just doesn't outstrip all these other valid needs as well. For the homeless 3-year plan, as I recall, the council was going to talk more about the plan at the budget time, and I was curious if the city is the plan lead. And the resolution says that the city will implement the plan. So is the plan the roadmap? And I was wondering where the rest of the funds are going to come from. Because if the city is spending $260,000 a year, that'll cover roughly a third of the cost of it over the 3-year period. But that leaves the county and nonprofits to bear the other $2 million some dollars. So I was just curious, where's that going to come from to implement the plan? I had met with Chief Cutting about the automatic license plate readers, and he met with me for 2 hours, and that was great. And I gave him a bullet point list of concerns that I had, but I'm one person, and so I have a concern that the city is really working hard to publicize the palm tree lights and the Olson Park, but there wasn't anything like that for the license plate readers. So I think that was kind of not the best job that the city could do, and I think a lot of other people would have more to say about it if they knew about it, but at this point it's kind of too late. There are some downsides to it. There's some good sides, but that's a concern of mine, but if I'm the only one, then too bad for me. The cemetery fund, I think the city has an obligation to honor the contract they had with the city mothers and fathers and to not lose control of the cemetery to a private entity. And I would also suggest selling Pinelli Park and making that into affordable housing, because there's another park that's really close to there on Ledson.
Thank you, Mr. Hollabach, for your suggestions. Ms. Fernandez.
Hi, I'm Annie Fernandez. I'm the president of Homeless Action Sonoma, and I want to also add my thanks. Really appreciate the city coming forward and making a commitment to help homelessness. I also want to thank Ron Wellander for coming by and having a tour the other day and being very honest with us. I have questions. I invite anybody to come by and have questions. We're doing tours now. We have not yet got the final permits to open, but the houses are all ready. They're outfitted. They're dressed. They're comfortable, and we're just waiting to occupy them. So it should be, I don't know. I hate to say, because I've said it too many times, but I'm looking in terms of weeks as opposed to months. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Any other comments from the public here or on Zoom? Okay, thank you. We'll close public comment on these items and bring it back to the council. We have 4 potential resolutions with motions. Are there any further comments or questions before we entertain a motion on these? So the first one would be to adopt a joint resolution. It's listed in recommended actions. Is there anyone who would like to make that motion?
I would like to make a motion
Please. So
to
you're
approve as is.
okay. So a motion has been made to adopt the joint resolution of the City Council and the City of Sonoma and the successor agency of the former Sonoma Community Development Agency, adopting fiscal year 23-24 City of Sonoma operating budget, approving community fund programming, and authorizing the city manager or their designee to execute task orders for the city engineering services with CIP consultants. That has been moved by Mr. Ding. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Farrar-Rivas,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Gurney,
Yes.
Councilmember Wellander,
Yes.
Councilmember Dean,
Aye.
Mayor Lowe.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
All right, the second one is before you to adopt the resolution regarding the capital improvement program. Is there a motion?
I have questions, so I just.
Oh, you have
I wanted to have some
have the motion first and then question. Very good. Motion
So moved. To adopt a resolution adopting the 23-24 five-year capital improvement program and authorizing capital project.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Yeah.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion? Mr. Wellander?
Not on the motion, but I have a question for discussion. I would love to know, when I see the word adopt, if there is any what I call wiggle room or ability to have downstream discussions about what we forecast, because I don't have a clear enough crystal ball, nor do I have a clear enough understanding just to go forward on authorizing 5 years of CIP without having the confidence that should something come up, lack of revenues, higher priorities. So I would love to know, well, whether or not there's going to be any flexibility in that.
Okay, let the city manager take that.
Yes, the five-year program can be changed every year and will be changed every year. We'll come back to you with reprioritization based on funding availability and priorities from council as goal setting. In addition, even the current year adopted budget can be modified. We will come back in a mid-year budget, and if there's issues that have come up or concerns from council, we can have those conversations. So the conversation you had just had earlier about doing the first step of a project, we'll gather information. At that point, there'll be time for conversations amongst the pros and others to provide direction on how to move forward.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Any other questions on the motion? Okay, seeing none, the clerk will please call the roll.
Councilmember Farrar-Rivas,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Gurney,
Yes.
Councilmember Wellander,
Yes.
Councilmember Dean,
Aye.
Mayor Lowe.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
All right. The third motion is the one where there's an amendment. So it would be to adopt a resolution establishing the list of authorized positions as amended.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Farrar-Rivas,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Gurney,
Yes.
Councilmember Wellander,
Yes.
Councilmember Dean,
Aye.
Mayor Lowe.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
All right, and the final one is to adopt a resolution regarding the homelessness services. Is there a motion?
Can we
Yes.
make one edit to this?
Please.
Well, first thing, if Councilmember Ding is still a board
Yes,
member of
I
SOS, then he needs
I
to
would
make a
like to
disclosure
make,
first.
Yeah, to make that statement.
Okay,
Yes.
please make your statement.
Thank you for your reminder.
Sure.
Here I have the due roles for this issue. I'm the city council member of the city of the Sonoma, and also I'm the volunteer, and also current to the board member treasurer for SOS. So according to this kind of position, because this is a job I have been in more than 10 years, I don't want to quit after I elected as the city council. So that's the issue. I consult with the city attorney city attorney couldn't give me an answer right away. So he transferred minor case to the state FPPC, which stands for Fair Political Practice Committee. After the investigation, and for two months, and then in March 2021, they sent the mail to the other city attorney, and according to the investigation, and they determined Jack Dean has no any interest or conflict for me when the city council made any decision for SOS. So I'm allowed to discuss and also made a decision. So before and today I made a vote, I need clearly and make this kind of a statement. I'm honored for this kind of decision, and also I will do my best. Before this issue, also I want to say that thank you my co-workers, Alina and Judith. Yeah, we are the fighters. We work together. Today, we got support from out of the city. Although the money is not significant, but it's symbolic. It's great. It's the first step. And I appreciate each of you. This is making a history in the city of Sonoma for homeless. Usually just $30,000. That is still good money because come from our local residents. But right now we got 260. We just look at the budget, 25 something. So basically this money just only 1%. Compared with other cities, I will not mention about San Francisco and Oakland, huge, hundreds and millions. Here, I so much appreciate the Sonoma here. Our residents, donors, they are using compassion, they use passion to support our city, to the care of our homelessness. I want to say thank you to everyone. Let's work together, move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, so we just ask that disclosure be reflected in the minutes, Madam Clerk. Thank you.
And Mayor, I'd like to make one
Yes.
amendment to this
Please.
item on the attachment A, based on the fact that we have received Measure O funding. I'd like to strike the first item, which is the by names caseless management services not to exceed $60,000. To remove that authority for use of general fund for that purpose, so I can use the grant. So if you can
Very
vote
good.
on that as amended with that striked.
Right, so we're going to adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to allocate funds for homeless services and to execute contracts with various homeless service providers for the fiscal year 23-24, with the exception of the By Names project, which shall be referred to for grant funding. With that amendment, I'll entertain a motion.
I actually have a quick question.
Quick question is fine.
So I'm on the board of Sonoma Ecology Center, and I think I'd already let David be aware of that, and I was under the so just to be sure, maybe I also need to make that statement, because the first adoption of the budget, some of that money does go to the Sonoma Ecology Center, and that I have no financial there's no financial relationship with me in the center. I'm just on the board.
Yeah, you don't have a conflict under the Political Reform Act.
Okay.
The issue that Councilmember Dean was dealing with was authorization to approve a contract.
Okay.
So that implicates Government Code 1090. There was we already have a contract with Sonoma Ecology Center, so there was no contract.
So when we get to negotiating the contract, I will make that statement into the record. So you can just disregard what I just said.
Okay. Well, no, I mean, transparency is great, and that's why we have meetings in public, and so all of that is good stuff. So as I stated with an amendment, is there a motion to adopt the resolution as amended?
I may be the only one who can do this. So moved.
I'll second it. All right. If the clerk will call the roll, please.
Councilmember Farrar-Rivas.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Gurney.
Yes.
Councilmember Wellander.
Yes.
Councilmember Dean.
Big ass.
Mayor Lowe?
Yes,
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
thank you very much.
I just want to make one comment overall because I shared in many moments some of the concerns that Ron was expressing about we have 3 new members of the council, we have a new city manager, we have a new interim finance director. We're all looking at this information that's very new to us. It's important that we get the budget passed, but we also are all very aware that there's going to be a lot of discussions. We're going to get the finance committee up and going, having discussions around revenue, discussions around the general plan, and that really at that time, through this process, we're going to set it up so it allows all of us to really dig in and to better understand, everybody on the city council to better understand the budget overall and each line item. So we're moving this process forward knowing that we have other opportunities to make adjustments along the way. Thank you.
Absolutely. The budget can always be amended, adopted, and so forth. I mean, it's a general document. It's a statement of values. It's a statement of priorities, but it's not necessarily every single penny. Obviously things will happen along the way, and we look forward to everybody participating in making it the best that it can possibly be. So, it is 8 o'clock. I'm going to ask if anybody needs a break, and then we're going to come back to 9.2, or we're just going to go for it. Huh?
Are you ready to go for it, or do you need a break?
All right, let's move right forward to 9.2. I love it. It's great. Okay, thank you all for being here. Okay, so 9.2, we finished with the item, and we're entertaining the next item, so you'll have to wait a moment.
Will there be time for public comment, or do I?
On 9.2, there will be time for public comment. Public comment is closed on the budget item.
No, not on the budget, but on any items, the public comment.
The public comment is closed, yes. We're on 9.2. When we entertain public comment on 9.2, if you can figure out a way to get your item in there, that'll be your best chance, all right? So hang in there. We need to move forward. Thank you. So 9.2, this is a new job classification, and yes. Let's move forward. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Lowe
Thank you.
and council members.
Mm-hmm.
So we are on the
9.2.
9.2 for
Thank you, Ms.
community-
Lanning.
the Community Development Department transition. So as part of the community development transition, we are proposing the building official position, which was included in the fiscal year 23-24 budget that was presented tonight. This position would be responsible for day-to-day operations and the management of the building division, and would report to the new community development director. This proposal supports the reorganization of the building division functions from the development services director onto the new community development department. Department to department. The current development services director / building official's retirement is planned for the fall of 2023. The city is required to maintain a single designated building official, as the position is granted numerous statutory and legal authorities. So the current salary for the development, the current development for the development services director or building official is a range of $12,167 up to $14,789 a month. The proposed building official salary is $10,227 up to $12,431 a month. This is based on a 2023 survey of the 7 cities that are agreed upon between the SEIU salary survey methodology for creating the new job classifications. The fiscal year 2023-24 budget includes a one-time cost of short overlap for work time for both positions for succession transitioning. So the recommendation is, the staff's recommending that the council adopt a resolution to approve the new job classification and salary range for the building official position that was in the 23-24 budget, direct the city manager to initiate the recruitment process, and designate the transfer of statutory and legal authority to the building official position.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lanning. All right, we'll have questions from the council, and then we'll turn it over to the public to see if there's any questions at all. And any questions on this? Yes?
Quick question. Currently, the soon-to-be retired long-term great person of Sonoma City Hall has been involved in a lot of cybersecurity. So my question to you is that, because that takes a chunk of time out of the tasks in building, who will be handling cybersecurity here on out?
That is on my plate to address over the next few months in preparation of Wayne retiring. That's on the list to do. That can be done a number of ways, either through contract or reassigning that to another staff member.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Lanning? Yes?
Yeah.
Mr. Gurney?
Ms. Lanning?
Yes.
Where were you the night of?
I did it, I swear.
So I just want to make sure that if we don't approve this, does that mean Wayne has to stay?
That works for me.
Perfect. Thank you.
You know, I was tempted. You read my mind. All right. We're going to have a big celebration, I think. Any other questions regarding this? Okay. Any comments from the public? This is the public comment. I know that you're not on this item, but if you'd like to ask your question, at least you'll have the ability to get it on the record or to make a comment.
Yes, thank you. This will be a bit unorthodox. So I'm Tiny Baldinger, 18044 Poplar
Yes.
in Boy Springs. This is the same topic that I raised the last time I was here. Raised is the relevant word. As we're all aware, we have a sister city, Kharkiv, in Ukraine. Ukraine is under brutal attack, and I'm coming with the same request. But this time I'm going to do it in a Ukrainian manner, which is by a poem. Raise the flag. Raise the flag for the little boy wading through water up to his neck from the sabotage of a dam, holding aloft a trusting puppy. Raise the flag for his courage. Raise the flag for his faith. Raise the flag for the love in his heart and for his fear. Raise the flag for the commander on the front for 9 long years, showing photos on his phone of his soldiers, his friends, flipping through them one by one. Killed, 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 killed. Raise the flag for the old woman wheeling her barrow of Easter breads, baked in her oven of crumbling brick in the heart of her roofless home, giving them to her neighbors, each in a ruined house of their own. Raise the flag to her stalwart heart. We must keep on living, she says. We must live. Affix the flag to the highest point, or hold it wide before the remnant of a pale green house, lovely in the Ukrainian way, or thread it through the broken windows of a shattered school. Fly it for the babies dead in a clinic built to care for mothers. Fly it for the toddlers who died as their families fled. Fly it for the children sucked into the maw of a voracious enemy. Raise the gentle flag, the blue of sky, the gold of wheat. Raise the beloved, defiant yellow and blue. Raise it, everyone, everywhere, to honor their courage fueled by love, though if ever there were time for hate, this surely would be it. Raise a flag to the singing. Raise a flag to the laughter. Raise a flag to the kind, kind people who love peace, who love a quiet, fruitful life, who carry guns and shoot to kill because they must. Raise the flag. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for waiting and being patient and putting that on the record, because it was certainly worth waiting for. Any other comments on Zoom or anywhere? No. So bring this back to the council for a motion for a resolution to approve a new job classification. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll be happy to make a motion to approve a new job classification and salary range as presented.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, the clerk would please call the roll.
Councilmember Farrar-Rivas,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Gurney,
Yes.
Councilmember Wellander,
Yes.
Councilmember Dean,
Aye.
Mayor Lowe.
I guess so, yes.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. All right, commission and committee rosters, any comments or anything that we need to do with that? I don't see anything. Is there something, Madam Clerk? No?
I'm sorry, I
Yes.
do have, as far as our commissions.
Yes.
There has been expressed some concern about the Design Review Commission.
Okay.
And lack of attendance, and I'm not sure if it's because of inconsistent meeting, but I just wanted to share that with my fellow councilmen. And I know, Councilman Ding, you are the liaison for Design Review, so I just want to bring that to your attention.
Okay.
All right, well,
Design
it's,
review.
it's important that,
Okay.
you know, if we have commissions that are not meeting because they're not establishing a quorum, we need to, first of all, note that, but also see what we can do about it, make some phone calls. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, because if these commissions don't meet, then things don't go forward, and then people come to us and go, well, how come you haven't approved such and such, you know, and then it's bad. So, so that's really an important thing to bring forward. The other thing is that we're still working on this remote meeting Brown Act issue, and Mr. Ruderman and I had exchanged a few emails about it, that the state legislature did something, but it was only for Los Angeles County committees that weren't even city council committees. They are going to have a hearing in October. The League of Cities is very involved in it, and I said that I would be willing to testify, because part of the problem and why we're not making quorums is that people got very used to meeting on Zoom, and as you know, for one reason or another, if we can get them to meet on Zoom, then maybe we can get a quorum. The other thing is that it would be really important to let these commissions know that they can use the 1 or 2 times a year loophole. I don't know, that's not the right word for it, but and saying that they're ill, or you know, someone in their family has COVID, they don't want to, you know, or whatever. Their water heater broke and they're, you know, underwater, whatever it is. And so they need to know that. The other thing is, I heard from one of the committee members that, you know, something like they were just trying to take, you know, are you going to be at this meeting? And they replied yes, and then there was some sort of admonishment that they couldn't answer because it was a Brown Act violation. And I told them, if you're just asking for attendance, that's not a problem. So I want to make sure that whoever is telling people that, I talked to 2 commission members over the weekend, and they were both like terrified of this whole thing. And you know, if we're going to produce a chilling effect on people where they are afraid to answer their emails to tell us that they can come or not come, then that's a big problem. Okay, so I don't know who was responsible for that, but you know, they were nervous about it, and we can't have people being nervous about it. We have to find every possible way to get people there and let them know that if there's a family emergency or something, that there's an option for them. And in the meantime, we'll try to twist arms at the legislature so that they can be more accommodating, because it's very difficult after you allow people to do something to then say, no, you can't do it anymore. I don't care what it is. It's hard to take away people's rights. Anyway, that's a long-winded saying that thank you, Mr. Wellander, for bringing that up. It's very important. Okay, any more comments on that? Okay, seeing none, I think we're at item 11, adjournment, and without objection, we are adjourned.